In 2026, we're not just heading into a year of major sporting events, we're heading into a year of cultural events. Moments that elevate identity, that unite generations, that bring people from different backgrounds together. Moments that shape conversation far beyond the score, the stadium, or the athletes on the field. Now, think about it. We've got the Super Bowl with Bad Bunny headlining entirely in Spanish, which transforms it from a really great game into a cultural milestone. We've got the Winter Olympics, and we've got the FIFA Men's World Cup, one of the biggest global gatherings of identity, pride, and fandom. If your brand hasn't figured out how to show up in culture in a meaningful way for moments like these, or how to genuinely connect with the communities who power them, now is the time. It's not too late, but it will be if you wait until these moments arrive. Because here's the truth. You cannot participate in these cultural moments with a single ad buy, especially not when the ad buys themselves are astronomical in pricing. Showing up in culture requires understanding culture. It requires leaning into identity and influence. It requires tapping into the conversations, creators, and communities that are already shaping the way your ideal customers think, feel, and connect. And when you do that well, you create deeper connection, you earn trust, and you open the door to long-term relationships with the underrepresented and underserved communities who are some of the biggest drivers of global sports fandom and who will shape the cultural conversation long after the events end. So after this short break, you'll hear my conversation with Cesar Martinez, Chief Commercial Officer at Sonoro, the largest multicultural podcast network in the world, and who's done a lot of work with brands tapping into sports cultural moments. Cesar is also someone who deeply understands the intersection of culture, creators, and community influence. Hey, did you know that most businesses only use 20% of their data? That's like reading a book with most of the pages torn out, or paying for a coffee that's just 1/5 full. Point is, you miss a lot unless you use HubSpot. Their customer platform gives you access to the data you need to grow your business. The insights trapped in emails, call logs, and transcripts, all that unstructured data that makes all the difference. Because when you know more, you grow more. And when you get a full cup of coffee, you can do more too. But I digress. Visit HubSpot.com today. Cesar, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing well. What a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Totally my pleasure. Well, I'm really excited to dig into our conversation today. I'm a big sports fan, not quite as big as I used to be, but I see that this year coming up, we've got a lot going on. So I really want to dig into that. But before we get too far into everything, let the people know, who are you and what do you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me again. My name is Cesar Martinez. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here at Sonoro Global Media. I lead strategy, partnerships. I've been in the digital and multicultural space for almost 2 decades. Had the privilege of leading some of the younger youth platforms and channels in the industry. I established Live Nations for separate multicultural commercial business. So I have a plethora of stuff, but really I joined these organizations for 2 reasons. One, I'm a champion of youth and multicultural cultures, just in general. I think it's so important to connect with folks in different ways, but through these cultural and honest kind of like channels and lens. I usually get brought on to build and scale these businesses, which has been a lot of fun over the years. So excited to be here at Sonoro. We are a global creator platform. We have leveraged digital, audio, full sort of studio model to catapult us into a top 5 podcast network, but also the leading multicultural creator platform in the world.
Very cool. You talked about your role as a chief strategy officer. And since you've been doing this for so long, I'm curious, what changes have you seen in strategy over the years? And I guess what you see as like on the outlook of where things are going? Because I imagine I've seen a lot of changes that I think have warranted a difference in traditional marketing playbooks over the past couple of years. And looking forward, it feels like a lot has changed and brands need to adapt. But I'm curious, because you're in the trenches day in and day out, what changes have you noticed and where do you see things are kind of evolving?
Sure. So I'm going to start with something controversial, but I think it's pretty on everybody's mind. Cultural competency.
Mm-hmm.
That has gone in and out of this industry for years. right? The idea of, I'm doing it, it's not working, I don't fully understand it, so I'm going to hire somebody to do it. That team didn't really fulfill on expectations. And so this idea of not fully understanding what it means to connect with audiences through whatever business you have, I think is something that continues to be of high importance. More importantly, I think is what allows these channels to sort of survive and continue to thrive. The other thing that you see is the impact of what's happened in the general business side, whether it's been politicized or not, right? That it continues to be on the front end. It's brought a lot of, I'm going to say intimidation, not fear, and second guessing in the way that brands or marketers should connect. And the one thing that I will say, and I was going to close with this, is don't be afraid. I think the idea, it doesn't change your strategy. I think you got to be very forward thinking. I think as we start talking more about sports and youth in particular, organically, you start seeing that it isn't any different. It just has to be tailored and a little bit more specific and intentional. And so the cultural marketing component to all of this, or whatever you want to call it, really comes with intent, investment, because it's a business decision, and really having the right folks behind you, or leading, I should say, the efforts.
Yeah, no, I think I love all the things that you mentioned, because we have seen a lot of people like paying a lot of attention to what's happening in the political space and making adjustments to that. So that courage is necessary, along with a greater degree of cultural competency, which I think, like you said, people are outsourcing a lot when that's a harder thing to be able to do. Now, one thing that I would say that is super big in cultures around the world are sports. And we've got a really big sports year coming up. Of course, there's a Super Bowl every year, but we've also got the Olympics in North America, the World Cup. What is the opportunity? What should brands who aren't sports brands be thinking about when it comes to, how to integrate, these big events that impact a lot of people, that a lot of people will be tuning into? How should they be thinking about that when it comes to their brand?
Yeah, these aren't just sports moments. These aren't just games. They're not, right? These are cultural gatherings, especially when you start looking at it from a global perspective. What's going to be happening here and in Mexico and in Canada is going to be pretty unbelievable, right? The Americas are coming together to be the number one sports destination globally. It's crossing countries and it's crossing language. And that's not done very often. And so when you think of what is happening within sports itself, it's about the fandom, right? So the modern fan doesn't fit the traditional sports marketing mold of yesteryear. They move fluidly between sports, culture, music, fashion, all of these adjacencies that come along with sports. It's no longer a vertical. When you think of what's happening, you got to look at it from a horizontal lens. When you think of what's happening with the broader culture, it's the experiences are happening on the platforms. We've talked about second screen viewing engagement, right? Where you have like Monday Night Football, but then you have the Mannings with their sort of simulcast, if you will. And you're paying more attention to that, right? Because it's engaging. Or you end up just watching it the next day in your own sort of preferred platform, whether it's highlights, whether it's moments of the game or whatever it may be. And to be honest with you, I think that because it's not verticalized anymore, channels and creators are really going to be the ones that are going to be engaging and winning with these audiences going forward. I think it's really about the enthusiast and the fandom that comes along with it versus, hey, who's your country of origin? What are you going to root for? It's a very, very layered cultural moment, especially now that you're going to have multi-generational fandom. You're going to have duality of influence. And then language is also going to, obviously play a role in it. So yeah, it's a really exciting time when I take a look. I'm in LA. When I take a look at what LA is going to be over the next 6 years, it's going to be the sports mecca, right? With the Olympics coming here as well.
Yeah.
So you got to think like, we'll get into a little bit of deeper, but when I think about sort of where do you need to be, you need to be in the moment and you need to amplify the moment versus trying to be part of the conversation.
Well, how should brands be thinking about this from the perspective of who the sports fan is? So I was at a conference a couple of months ago and I did an interview, and someone mentioned that Taylor Swift brought a lot of women to football. And I just remember thinking, I was a diehard football fan long before all this ever happened. And so I was just like, no, it's more than just that. But I think that a lot of times people, including brands, have a very limited view of who the sports fan is and who that person is. Can you talk a little bit about any shifts that you've been seeing in overall fandom and, just give a little bit of a lay of the land of who are these fans? It's because I know it's more than just men.
Yeah, no, it's certainly nuanced, right? The other piece is also, I think you have to think less of the demographic, but rather more of understanding the movement. Okay. And when you take a look at Latinos, I mean, there was a point, Sonia, where I stopped presenting Latino stats. I think one of my slides, I got so frustrated in being in marketers' rooms and agencies that I said, please call Univision. They have the best stats for you, right? And let's really dig into what does this mean for your business or for your messaging or for your demographics, right? So I think two things. One is when you take a look at what was happening with the US, I think the last time we hosted was in 1994. There was about 26 million Hispanics, right? It's now 2026 and there's close to like 65 million right here in the US. So the demographic alone, the stage, the audience has just almost more than doubled. And then you have sort of where Latino fans sit, right? Latino sports fans are more likely to connect through shared passion points, favorite athletes versus favorite teams versus, sort of identity and content alone. I think the key to winning these audiences will be identifying the channels that you connect with. Those are going to be very like-minded creators more than anybody else. It's not about like, I got to go to Fox or Telemundo to watch the game. There's going to be a connection and a lead up and momentum to that game via these channels and these amazing culture first creators. And I think that's where Sonoro is playing a very, very important role. Last year, we started to pivot the business into really putting us at the forefront of being a platform that allows for creativity, that allows for a home to build. We have a massive footprint in Latin America. Obviously, we're number one in Mexico, number one here in the US. But the idea of operating and thinking like a platform is so important, not just because of the global influence, but because of where these channels are going, the way that we identify emerging creators and look at content ecosystems, I think is super important. So also from a business perspective, operating like a platform makes a lot of sense, right? You diversify revenues, you can develop and look at and launch new businesses based on creator interest. You can invest in creators and both in their content or, a lot of these people are now operating as like mini VC-backed businesses. They just need some funding to go and do the amazing things that they're really good at, which is creating connections with their audiences. So I think when you have to look at sort of the Latino consumer, especially when it comes to sports, that they're already in the mainstream, they're probably leading and connecting with these cultural leaders and tastemakers across social. And so how do you double down on that? There's a variety of ways, right? And I think that's what we get to do every single day.
I think I saw a stat that said that the Latino community is the fastest growing American football fan. And so the NFL is really thinking about this community a lot in particular. And as I think about how brands are trying to engage and connect, you mentioned that you all have a platform and you're number one in all these different markets. I find that a lot of times brands will focus their media efforts on very large traditional markets or channels that are focused on general market. And I'm really curious from your perspective, especially given the reach and the trust that you all have, how should brands be thinking about more minority-owned media or media that is very much centered on specific communities, especially as it relates to these types of cultural events?
Yeah, great question. So two things. One is we need, and I mean we, the industry, especially on the publisher side, because I think that's really suffering, to have an opportunity to have a seat at the table, right? Like, some folks, and you start seeing sort of the trends, right? Publishers are struggling. They're sort of dead and creators are continuing to excel. And at the end of the day, who's winning? TikTok, YouTube, the platforms, right? And so I think there's got to be two things here. One is, let's take Liga MX as an example, right? Liga MX for years has been sort of the dominating league in Mexico. has been a feeder to a lot of the sort of the cultural football culture here in the US. When you take a look at what is happening from a fandom perspective there, that is a league and a sport that has transcended 4 generations, right?
Wow.
Here in the US. I think they're going to benefit the most from the World Cup, right? Because again, that cross generational connection, the ability to open up their doors to a wider investments, which they've just announced a couple of months ago they're going to be doing. But also, I think they're also set for a massive moment of connection with the U.S. market that happens to be multi-generational Latino. So whether your grandfather was a fan of Chivas and you're a fan of this or whatever it is, there is going to be that cultural connection. And so more and more, when I think like, how do you connect those dots? You almost have to have like a Liga MX strategy. That community, one of our partners, Cabra, does exactly that. They're an English language soccer channel that is highlighting Mexican La Liga MX and everything that comes along with it. And they do it, if you close your eyes, the narrator, the voice behind it, you're like, oh, that's a guy from East LA. That's a 16-year-old from East LA. Or that's a guy from Miami, right? Just in terms of, but it's in English. Right. But they're talking about sort of these very like culture forward moments and in real time, but doing it through sort of this lifestyle culture lens. And so I think they've built a community in a very short period of time that is relatable. And what has changed? It's the ability to create the culturally relevant content in the formats and in the places that these audiences and these younger audiences are. And that's TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah. So you, at the top of the show, you mentioned cultural competence, right? And so if we think about all these upcoming cultural moments that are happening. So for instance, a couple of years ago, 2022, I watched the World Cup for the first time ever.
Congrats.
Right?
Congrats.
It was a good year to
fun.
watch, right? Because Argentina won. And I was on the edge of my seat watching with my Argentine extended family. But I imagined if I was a marketer trying to tap into the World Cup, that wouldn't have been, I had none of the real cultural competency to be able to understand really how to do that, all the stories, all the different meaning behind it. And sometimes I think marketers are, of course, very good at their craft, but so much of it is integrating different cultures, different fandoms, different parts of that. So what are your recommendations for marketers who were like experts on their brand, but not experts on the Super Bowl and football and the World Cup and the Olympic? Like, how should they be thinking about that when they are just, it's
Yeah. First of all, congratulations on having budgets that allow you to participate at an official level. But I'll be honest with you, the most powerful activation, at least adjacencies to, let's just take the World Cup, are not going to be the pre-produced commercials. They're going to be creator-led storylines that evolve in real time, right? The brands that will win will look less like advertisers and look more like an editorial studio that participated in the dialogue and the discussion. Right. And then the distribution of that doesn't become linear through a commercial, a 30 or a 60 or whatever it is. It really becomes a much broader distribution strategy at the end of the day. So if I'm a marketer and I'm thinking, okay, who do I need to work with that can get me the most influential creators, which could be Sonoro or somebody else if you're looking to target a different audience or whatever it may be. Can I authentically align with the way that they create their creator strategy and their connection with their audience? And are they capturing and translating the emotional aspect of the storyline as quickly as his games are being played?
Okay.
Right. And I think that makes a big role. One of the brands that I think has been doing it right is Adidas. Their embrace of creator-led campaigns has been pretty amazing. And they needed to find new ways to connect with the younger consumer because they're losing ground to Nike. Right. And even New Balance. So again, they made an intentional decision to go culture creator first. Right. And then mold their strategy to that. And I think that's paying off in multiples.
Yeah. So
Okay, I've got another podcast recommendation for you. It's Augmenters, hosted by Julie Meyer and Jimmy Edgerton, and it's brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. So on this show, Julie and Jimmy dive into mentoring and explore ways to augment and refresh the mentoring environment. They're using 8 core principles that weave relevant spirit guides and diverse guests, and Julie and Jimmy use a lot of humor and practical tips to help mentors and mentees get further faster together. There's so many great episodes to tune into for this show, but one that you might find especially interesting is their latest episode, number 120, Mentoring Across Gender, Men as Allies and Mentors. Listen to Augmenters wherever you get your podcasts.
So thinking about that, what are some examples of, and these can be projects that you all have worked on, of how non-sports brands have been able to tap into specific cultural moments, whether the things that they're upcoming or things that have already happened there where you've seen a nice impact?
Yeah, so we're starting to do that now. We have 3 different partnerships that we're really excited about that really helped us align with both our creator platform and then our creativity that comes out of our studio division. The number one is with Andres Cantor, the godfather, Argentinian, godfather of soccer. For years, it's going on 40 years, he's had his terrestrial radio network, Grupo de Primera. He came to us and challenged us to, put together a strategy to bring his digital and social business forward. And so we're working with him to launch new shows that are digital first, maybe lifestyle focused, maybe with friends and family to participate, to bring a different perspective versus sort of the talking heads and the amazing thing that he does, every game.
Right.
That has a pretty heavy content development strategy, both on the premium side, but also a very, very heavy social strategy. So marrying that with what we know from a platform expertise and aligning like-minded creators to support those strategies, there are tons of creators who do sports stuff and they're really good at it, but it happens to be like music and sports or fashion and sports. And so finding those folks and being able to sort of not bundle, but align them with somebody like Andres Cantor to support that messaging or that strategy is something that we're really excited about. The second is Cabra FC. Like I said, they're a social first brand, really passionate about Liga MX and soccer, but they're doing it in the preferred language, which is English. They're doing it through this lifestyle lens. Again, if you think about it, what is the Latino version of Barstools? There isn't, right? And so I think they're bringing a little bit of culture to those channels in a way that's unique and really connecting, I think, above and beyond. So that's our social first partner. And then the last one is Religion of Sports. They are Tom Brady and Michael Strahan's production company, been around for 8-9 years, Emmy Award-winning studio. But they came to me, I think in March earlier this year, like, hey, we want to run something by you. And they presented this idea, this series around Liga MX. And they're like, hey, we think we're sitting on something. We want to develop sort of a docu-series, think Hard Knocks, but really more focused on the fandom and the duality of both U.S. and Mexico, still highlighting 3 teams, but we want to do it all in English. And I almost fell out of my chair, Sonia. I was like, thank goodness that somebody is thinking about this audience through a different lens. Because if you were to do that in Spanish, it would not have, I don't think it would have the impact that it would have in English. And they're going to distribute it through, I think, a traditional partner. We're going to co-develop the podcast components to all of this stuff, or the podcast components to all of this stuff. So when you think of sort of the partnerships that are going to be driving our platform and our creators, you have a legacy business that has now being brought forward through somebody who is the leader in the sport itself. You have somebody who's found a very niche community aspect and has been able to build a scale audience relatively quickly on social in the formats that is being consumed by memes and videos and social series. And then we have our premium partner, which is, hey, we're going to invest heavily in trying to make something that could be bigger and broader for the US audience. And so I think we're right down the middle. Not a lot of companies can say that, and again, operating like a platform, that we have these and then add the Sonoro studio element to it, add the creator component to it. It becomes a really, really robust offering and an opportunity for us to hopefully bring value to the marketplace, but also have conversations around strategy. And I'll close with this. That's really really we strive. When we walk out of rooms, people say, hey, we're going to brief you for our media stuff, but we've been kicking around this idea. Can you help us with your strategy? And that's another benefit that comes from Camila's great creative group, who's our chief content officer and co-founder. And of course, our strategy group as well, being able to kind of merge that. So instead of being viewed as a creator platform only or a publisher that your audience, even though it's tiny, they're really looking at us to help guide on multi-platform strategies and creative strategies.
What I'm hearing you're saying from a lot of these examples goes against what a lot of brands are doing, but I don't think that brands are thinking about a lot of this in the right way. And what you all are doing is you're focusing on the cultural moment, and you're elevating the cultural moment with people who are in the culture, part of the culture, eat, sleep, drink, everything part of the culture. And I feel like a lot of times brands will say, how can I bring my brand and our message to these moments? And I think that's kind of where they probably fall short a little bit, is because they're very much focused on their brand and the message, not necessarily being a participant in a culture. Is that kind of what the distinction?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm not saying we're better and smarter than the CMO or their teams or their 5 agencies, but the idea is at the end of the day, they have to move product, right? At the end of the day, and there are tactics for that, right?
Yeah.
What we're saying is, can you connect with this audience through a unique lane that's very specific and can still bring that value to you with scale?
Okay.
And that's the other piece. The biggest challenge that I have had, even with other businesses, is scale. Okay. Launching a content company or is very hard. And so when you take a look at what creators can do for you, you really have to again trust that strategy, and you work with them just like you work with everybody else, right? Make sure that the messaging is there, that it's aligned there, but you also have to give them the freedom to connect with their audiences. And so I think there's a lot of value there. I think, again, going back to that sort of cultural competency, it's allowing for that process to happen with said creators or platform.
Yeah. What advice would you give to marketing leaders on how to do a better job of authentically connecting with these different communities that are historically underrepresented and underserved? I did a research study on state of representation in marketing, and I did it in 2001, and then I repeated it again this year. And the number one thing that was the biggest source of frustration for consumers with regards to brands engaging in trying to reach them was they felt like there was a real gap in authenticity. They just felt like you're checking a box, right? Or you're going at a very superficial level. And I imagine where we're moving into, as we're talking about this from a fandom perspective and all these big cultural moments, are there, but even there and beyond, as they're trying to connect and engage with these communities, what advice would you have for how to do that authentically and eliminate the friction that comes with not doing it in a way that speaks to people?
You got to think like a challenger brand, right? Even if you have the official connection, right? Okay. I think right now we have the ability to, given the fragmentation in media, it's a new era, right? Brands must be comfortable in rewriting their own playbook, right? That matters so much. Reach is less important than relevance, and your strategy shouldn't just be centered around sponsorship. It should be centered around active participation and dialogue with the consumer. This is also, I think, why the sports industry is being challenged by their sponsorship brands, right? Whether you're Major League Baseball, who I think has, after years and years of trying to figure out how to reconnect with young audiences, are doing a great job. The NFL is light years ahead, right? The NBA has sort of figured it out, but it's because of that active participation that they have. And more, I think on the sports league side, and you're probably going to see this, which is great, thanks for putting my logo in an arena or a stadium. What's your innovation that comes along with it? Who are you partnering with? Is it a Sonoro? Because I hear that they should be big. Or is it a creator? Because I think we should do something with them. So only brands that can speak directly to creators and communities are going to be able to shape this. And I think that's that part of cultural competency that comes along with being unafraid. And look, I understand that there's also the whole kind of marketing ladder that you got to check those boxes on. There's still a way to do this. There's still time, by the way, for World Cup, not a big window, right, to shift your strategy or think about it differently. And I think that those are going to be the winners at the end of the day. There's also a moment to hijack these things, whether you're an official partner like Coca-Cola or McDonald's. If you're within that same category, there are entry points where you can probably have, if not the same, but even bigger impact by having a different type of different type of strategy along with tactics. So there's a lot out there, and there's a lot out there for the next 6 years when it comes to sports in the US. And it's a really exciting time.
Real quick before we switch gears, should brands be thinking about Bad Bunny headlining the Super Bowl and how they should be, a part of this cultural moment?
Congrats to the NFL for being unafraid. And the way that I had a conversation just over the holiday with somebody, the Super Bowl act has always been controversial. It's always been. It's a genre. It's, worlds collide in terms of genres. You're a country fan, you're a pop fan, you're a hip hop fan, like whatever it is, you're always going to have a part of the world or audience that's going to say, well, that's not my music, right? Now it's just been politicized a little bit. But what the NFL has done is investing globally in their business. When they started the games in London and Mexico and Brazil this year, right? They have really said, you know what? This is a business imperative and a business decision that we're making globally. And we happen to have access, and we're able to cut a deal with the number one artist in the world. Hard stop. That should be the end of the conversation. Obviously it's not, and it won't be. Why? Because it is controversial to have somebody at their Super Bowl. So look, for me, I'm excited that he's there. I also have to feel like I wish we weren't saying, oh, he's a Puerto Rican artist. I would just love for people to be like, he's the biggest artist in the world.
Yeah. Totally get it. Can you tell me about a time when a brand made you personally feel like you belonged?
I'll tell you this. So we had a meeting with Nike years ago. They brought their team in from China. They brought a team in from Latin America. They were looking at how diverse Los Angeles was from a community perspective, right? So we did a market tour with them. We had different panels. It was like a 3-day thing. This was also when they were opening up and partnering with their Nike store in East Los Angeles, the first ever Nike store there. And I remember we had a panel of a bunch of young folks, and we're sitting just south of where I am now in West Hollywood. And one of them said, if Nike had a party and pointed up at the Hollywood Hills here, I don't think I'd be invited. And I was like, wow, he's rocking Jordans. He's rocking a Nike hoodie, but he wouldn't be invited to the Hills, to the party that Nike would have in the Hills, right? And so to me, that was such an eye-opening experience. It was like, well, you've connected with this consumer. He's wearing your stuff, but what's the missing link? And again, I do think, and this was, as TikTok was emerging and other platforms, but I do think that you have to invest in those communities. And I think that the intention of that East LA store and bringing in other countries, saying, look at this melting pot of a city, and the fact that somebody is still saying, I want to be part of the Nike party. And so to me, I was like, how do you do that? You do that by being part of the community. And you can look at it from a macro and micro perspective, right? Community is everything. And what are the 3 things that are most difficult to do as a global business? Because we're global, is build communities in so many different places. You do that through personalities and creators. They are the feeder into the community. And so to me, it's not more of like when I can tell you what I didn't belong to. I don't belong to Gucci. I don't belong to any of that stuff, right? But it's also out of my price range. But I do think more and more, you have the ability to connect with youth and audiences if you have access to their community. And being part of that community matters. It will always matter. And this is another reason why, I struggle with, the diverse publishing world, sort of being minimized now, because you're cutting off ties that may have access to the community. So we're doing it from a creator and all in global perspective.
Very cool. Very cool. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and your work and all the great shows that the Sonoro team has? I use the work that you all did with Toyota as an example all the time because I think it was a really great thing. So
yeah, that was a great series. Cesar at sonoromedia.com, LinkedIn. I've been doing this for 20 years, so somebody has my cell phone number. Just ask. But look, I've been here now going on almost 2 years. I joined the company because of the people. I joined the company because of the importance of continuing to kind of build these culture forward businesses. And looking at what was happening in the marketplace at that time, I said, if there's one sort of last hurrah, or there's a platform that I want to invest my personal time in and also help grow and develop with really good people, it's a company that's really influencing, I think, culture, more importantly, supporting folks that are influencing culture. And so that's why I'm here. We feel really strongly about the business. Again, from a creator partnership perspective, at the end of the day, the mission is, for me, my remit is connect blue chip Fortune 500 brands with these amazing audiences, with a variety of strategies and channels. But really, it's continuing for me to push the narrative. Culture matters, our people matter, and these businesses are important.
Yeah. Culture matters, people matters, and these businesses are important. And the reason why I feel like we have to say this, because I think sometimes whenever people hear culture and they hear connecting with these different communities, they feel like it's something that they should be doing, but they don't always connect the dots that this is an actual business growth driver. So do you have any parting words of wisdom for marketers and business leaders who want to tap into these communities as well as these cultural moments that we've got coming up as a way to not only just be a part of culture, but also to drive their business growth?
If you feel that you've done it and it didn't work, try again. If you feel you've over dialed or prescribed and you're making adjustments to your marketing plans, you're going to suffer. There's a retailer who's suffering. There's several retailers that are suffering because of some of their decisions, and they're slowly dialing it back, right?
Yeah.
Also, I think, again, if you were to peel back just culture from a business perspective, the numbers speak for themselves. If I walked in a room and I said, you're going to reach this many people, most influential, females are starting this, most small businesses in the US, this is going to be a movement around sports. And of course, bonus points. We happen to be diverse. We happen to be brown.
Yeah.
We have, right?
Yeah.
You would say, of course, right? Versus starting with, should I be concerned about my diversity strategy or my cultural strategy?
Yeah.
Right? I'll leave you with this thought. If I had one chip and I'm walking out of the Vegas casino and I had one audience to bet on, I would bet on diverse audience and diverse business, because I know that my return is going to be much larger. How about that?
I love that. And I would too. Totally. 100%. Cesar, this has been a lot of fun, really enlightening. And I'm just so thankful that you stopped by and shared your experiences and your wisdom with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan. Continue to do the good work. We need it. And I hope to see you soon.
All right. So as you look into 2026, remember this: culture isn't a tactic. It's where your customers already live. And next year will reward the brands that understand culture and expose the ones that don't. Sports, identity, influence, and community are colliding in ways we haven't seen before. The Super Bowl, the Olympics, the World Cup, and more. These aren't just events. They are cultural stages where identity is celebrated, community is visible, and values are on full display. And that is happening, again, not just at these events, but in all sorts of conversations that are happening online and offline, leading up to these events, during the events, and long after the events are over. And the brands who do the work now, who build cultural competency, earn trust, and show up with intention will be the ones positioned to grow in 2026 and long after, because growth comes from trust, and trust comes from showing up for the communities who power culture, not once, but consistently. If you like the show, I would so appreciate it if you would share it with your friends, colleagues, and your network. It really does go a long way towards helping more people discover the show. And I'm super curious in hearing, how are you planning to show up for these cultural sporting events? I want to know about it. Let's continue the conversation on social, in the DMs, send me an email. Let's chat about it. I want to hear what you're doing. Until next time, remember, everyone deserves to have a place where they belong. Let's use our individual and collective power to ensure more people feel like they do. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you soon.